Yo, I'm your host Suicide, and welcome back to Marginal. Now, these intros have been going on for a little too long, and they're taking out a lot of the video's time, so I'm just gonna cut them down for now.
今日も雨は止まない。
Since I've come to live in this world alone, I believe that 100 years have already passed. I didn't know the exact number of days, but from the things that occasionally flowed in on the river, I could get a sense. From the plants and flowers, I could sense the seasons. From the writings and crafts, I could get a sense of the ages.
そして約100年もの間、ここに誰も来なかった。
That's a lot of time to wait alone without much to do, you know. I didn't know the reason. The method for staying in this world that lady had gone to the trouble of telling me. The opportunity to use it sadly never came. And I had a feeling that at some point the instances where I talked to myself increased. I had a feeling I was coming to dislike this world. If someone were to come, I wasn't sure if I could tell them lies and chase them out. 100 years might be enough to change a person. After coming here, I was tiring of holding on to the throne of being mistress of the rainy world.
だけど、反省をする気はない。仮にここが神への反省室だったとしても。
Even if God or whatever wanted to place upon me the requirement of atonement, even in a place where you couldn't starve or die and living 333 years were possible, even if I were to grow to dislike living, I had no intention of being sorry. I absolutely did not want to do anything that might benefit something like a god. Today the rain continued to fall and the river continued to flow smoothly. Lately, I have been here
こ
often.
の世界に果てはあるのだろうか。
She said that at some point she said that there isn't any, you know, any reason for going to the other river. There's nothing that binds, I guess, together these two worlds. Because I think that she's now going to explore. A question that had crossed my mind. I muttered it out loud for some reason while gazing at the flowing river. For being called a river, it was so big that you couldn't see the other shore. Come to think of it, I hadn't come far from that place with the roof, because I hadn't had a need or a reason to go anywhere. Do I go down with the river, or up, or perhaps go across? Yeah, I mean, after 100 years you might as well look for south, cause you don't have really anything better to do with your time, so after debating for a bit, I made a
川を
decision.
渡ってみよう。向こう岸には何かがあるかもしれない。
While murmuring that, I took one step in the flow of the river.
冷たい。
From my bare feet, a chilly feeling spread up through my legs. Underneath my feet, I could feel the sensation of a silky beach. Wait, that is the Miko cloth, isn't it? Splashing loudly as I walked into the river, immediately my next doubt arose.
もし川の水が私の背丈よりも深くなったらどうなるのだろう。
Can you not swim? Of course, I knew that even if I were to drown, I wouldn't die. Already I'd experienced it once. Previously, there was a time I had climbed a pillar at the usual place and accidentally fell off the roof. Falling from the tide, there was no way I could walk away, especially considering you fell on hard rock stone. Hard rock stone? On rock hard stone. However, I was fine even though my arms and legs were twisted in wrong directions. Even with my neck broken, I was covered in blood. All it did was hurt, and I imagine it hurt a lot. The next day, everything was back to
あ
normal.
の時点で私は理解した。
This place was a world where you would never die, and at the same time, it was a world where you could never die? What? No matter how much I wished to die, that probably was not allowed. This place was perhaps a place for one person to only be rained upon. While vaguely thinking about that, I continued to splash loudly, walking in the river as always. I couldn't see the far shore. Eventually, when I continued for a while, I soon came upon the answer to my earlier question.
これ以上深くならない。
Apparently, even in the deepest place, it was up to about the knees. At the shallow parts, the water barely went up to around my ankles. I had already walked quite a bit since I first set foot in the river. Turning around, I already couldn't see the shore I came in from. If I've walked this far and the depth hasn't changed, then no matter how far I went in the river, it would probably be like this. Coming to that conclusion, I once again began walking. The far shore that seemed to be beyond the rain haze still couldn't be seen. Night, when everything changed to be completely dark. In darkness, where I couldn't see anything, only the sounds of the river gurgling and the rain striking the water surface sounded. In the middle of the night, while my body was being struck by the rain, I stood alone in the river.
疲れた。もう何も見えない。
Thinking about it, I had spent almost an entire day walking in the river. More precisely, I was in the middle of crossing it to the far shore. However, from what I could see before nightfall, the far shore wasn't in sight. Afterwards, I had walked even farther, but didn't think I would arrive at the other shore. Right now, because I couldn't see anything in the dark, I kept walking on, while praying that the water touching my feet would suddenly disappear, but
もう歩けない。
after a full day and I don't know how long on the night you walked, but especially on water, it gets really tiring to continue walking. With that whisper, I squatted down in place. Forget about walking, I was past the limit of standing. And just like that, I collapsed on my back. Yes, she is wearing the Miko robe, I guess you can call it. But so, where is it? Why is she wearing that other cloth now? My back, feet, arms, all the parts that touched water felt the chilly flow of the river. I felt my long hair swaying in the current towards downriver. The tiny anticipation that I could have the choice to die by drowning had been denied by water only as deep as my ankles.
もう引き返した方がいいのだろうか。
I whispered to myself, half submerged in the river. They weren't words meant to ask someone else. If anything, they were words to myself. But even if I turned back, it wouldn't be much different from continuing like this. Even if I returned to that place, it wasn't as if something would happen. It wasn't as if there were someone waiting. Just days of watching the rain again. While thinking about that, I slowly fell asleep. While sleeping facing up, the river's water would sometimes cover my face. The depth was just enough that I could barely breathe. Drowning like this and dying wouldn't be that bad either. Since the day I came here, with about 100 years passing, it seems my thinking has changed a bit. It wasn't that I wanted to die, but I also didn't want to live. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of rain splashing on the water's surface. Apparently I had fallen asleep at some point. Already the world around had turned from inky darkness to white
残
rain.
念ながら溺れ死ぬことはなかったらしい。
I mean, you can't die in this place anyway, so there wasn't any proof of that. Ultimately, it was nothing more than I was alive right now. It could have been that while sleeping I had went from lying face up to face down, drowned and died. But there was the possibility I had soon come back to life. It was even possible I had died multiple times and came back each time. All were things I was not aware of because I had been sleeping. I mean, if you're drowning while...
このまま進んでみよう。
if you're drowning while you're asleep, you probably wake up as a, as a natural reaction of the body, because you have it on your instinct to try and survive. If the body senses that it's a risk, it's gonna just wake you up and try to struggle to not die, even if you know that you technically can't die. But that's beside the point. Raising my submerged body with a loud splash, I stood up. Last night I had worried a bit, but I decided to once again aim for the far shore. It was simply better than watching the rain back at the shelter. It was exactly because there was nothing I could do that made me want any kind of goal at all. After that I kept crossing the river. During the day I walked. At night I would sleep where the water was shallow. Countless times I woke up underwater. I don't have a conscious memory of it, but I probably died sleeping at night. When I would wake up, it was just a bit difficult to
こ
breathe.
の向こう岸はどれだけ遠いのだろう。
While continuing to walk with loud splashes in the river, the same whisper spilled out countless times. I had already walked for 10 days, but as far as the far shore showed no sign of appearing. But as always, the far shore showed no signs of
そう
appearing.
いえば
A question that I had once before had suddenly come to
もし
mind.
私がここにいる間に誰か新しい人が来たらどうなるのだろう。
Well, probably the 3 days will pass and here will just disappear, I guess. And that person would know nothing about this place, because there was no one to tell that person about this place or how it works, and will be so confused. From what Lady had explained, the place population was 1, and I was told that the person who came first would be sent back automatically. In this situation, the one that came first was, of course, myself. And it should be that there was a grace period of 3 days where 2 people could be here. If right now someone were to come, even if I turned back to that place, I might not making it in time. Then would I be automatically sent back to the real world without meeting that
で
person?
もそれならそれで構わない。
Now I wasn't afraid of being sent back to the real world. Even that didn't bother me. After you live so long, especially in such a place, you probably don't care anymore about wanting to leave. If I lost my memories upon return, then I could accept the atonement as something I couldn't change. More than that, I hated the idea of my heart changing to repenting and forgiving that God or whatever. 10 years after, or so I think, having experienced countless days and nights, I don't really know the precise time. But from the occasional things, broken remains from the real world that flowed in the river, I had a rough sense. And it was after coming here that I finally spoke the
もしか
words.
したら向こう岸は存在しないのかもしれない。
Where she's been walking for like 10 years. The thing I had faintly sensed long ago, I finally accepted. There was no way that I wouldn't be able to get there after walking this much. I had a feeling that most likely, no matter how far I went, the far shore would never come. In a mysterious place like this, it was probably possible. I changed the direction that I'd been walking. However, it wasn't simply turning back to where I came from.
今度は川上へと行ってみよ
Turning right, I started walking upriver. It could be that, like the far shore, it didn't exist. But with things flowing in from the real world, there must be some kind of source.
焦らずに行ってみよう。時間だけは無限にある。
Yep, you got a point there. I told myself that, saying it another way, in this place there is nothing but time. Even with just the width of this river, I still couldn't see the other side despite walking 10 years, so I needed to be prepared for more than that. Another 10 years have passed, and today also I was continuing to walk facing the river's flow. Even after spending this much time, there was no real change in the river. However, since I had been prepared for this from the beginning, I wasn't that discouraged. Before, aft, left and right, I couldn't see anything but water that formed the horizon. But getting lost was the one thing that was impossible. Because of the flow of the river, direction was the only thing I knew. Without worrying, I continued to quickly go upriver. When I think another few years have passed, as always, there was no change in the river, but I had this feeling that I was seeing more things that flow in from the real world.
もしかして上流に来たということだろうか。
Yeah, because the place she was at first only had a part, I think, of the things that were washed up by the river, because at some point, from wherever they come from, they had to bump into the uneven terrain or other sides of the river, or I don't know, wherever, whenever, however, anyway it had to bump into something. So the things that actually managed to reach her in the one place that she went to take the stuff, obviously was not like everything that flowed through the river. My theory might have been correct. So long as there were things that flowed in, there must be a source. Whenever they fell in whether they fell from the sky or sprung from the ground, however they came, I had begun to think like that. I had begun to think that, like the far shore, it didn't exist, so this change was heartening. 50 years later, whoa. And then, when another 50 years have passed, thinking about it, since the day I had started trying to walk upriver, close to 100 years have passed. My feet, which had been walking this entire time, finally stopped.
川の中に大きな穴が開いている。
Whoa. So she finally found it. Suddenly it appeared before my eyes on the water surface, a black hole that was just gaping open. It was as big as the room that I once lived in at the shrine. Cautiously approaching, I peered in from the edge, but it was completely dark in there and I couldn't see anything. It resembled the hole that I first came to this world from. But the one I came in was just big enough for my own body, while this was quite large.
ここから現世とつながっているのだろうか。
Yeah, this is probably where the things wash up from. As if providing a demonstration in response to my words, the large hole in the water would occasionally spew something out. When I picked up the fragmented things that was drifting on the
これは
current,
食台の一部。
and it was as if it had been just used. The area where the candle would be still had warmth. There were also things that resembled wooden message strips and fragments of some unfamiliar
どう
pottery.
やらここから流れてきていたのだろう。
I was talking about the things that had been gathering from the riverside. I thought they were destroyed while drifting, but apparently they were broken to begin with. However, looking around, there weren't any other holes, and the river's flow was still connected upriver. What should I do? I stood there
この
thinking.
まま進んでも川の果てはないのかもしれない。
Just like with the far shore, this place itself wasn't a world humans could comprehend. To begin with, it was also too strange to think it took things 100 years to flow to this place. This seems to be a good opportunity to turn back to my starting point. Thinking about it, I started walking in the river for no reason, and 100 years have passed since I left that starting place. That essentially meant that for many years I'd continued to be struck by
も
rain.
う帰ろう。雨に濡れないあの場所に。
With that murmur, I was about to turn my heels. But then I thought one last thing to try out.
もしここが現世とつながっているなら
Then, couldn't I go back from here? With that thought, I slowly stretched my hands out towards the hole. It wasn't as if I wanted to return to the real world. It was just that I was afraid of how my own feelings might one day change. Even if I returned to the real world, quickly die, and the atonement were to be broken, the one thing I didn't want to do was forgive. Eventually, the hand I had stretched out disappeared into the darkness of the hole. Oh, it was then. That instant, I reflexively let out a voice like a scream, enough to surprise even myself. It had been the first loud voice I've used in decades.
手が消えてる。
Oh, because it's a portal to another world, so if you put parts of your body in there, then obviously they're gonna be separated from your body. The part that had entered the hole from my wrist to my fingertips had disappeared. It hadn't been cut nor crushed, it had literally ceased to exist. From the arm that had lost everything beyond the wrist, there was a burning sensation of pain and strongly gushing blood. While clutching my arm from the pain, a number of thoughts came to me. I didn't care about my hand. It will be back to normal by tomorrow
そ
anyway.
れよりもおそらくここは入り口。
It was a hole for only things coming in from the real world. From this side, entering was impossible. The risk that had been annihilated spoke volumes about that.
そして入り口があるのならばどこかに出口もあるのも同理。
Oh, so she's gonna go downriver? If things constantly just appeared, then it would eventually fill up. So an opposing, annihilating exit should also exist. Turning my heels, I slowly started to walk. My next destination was decided. The lower river, downstream.
この場所からどれだけ遠いのかわからないけど
Probably hundreds and hundreds of years. If an exit were to exist, I was sure it was downstream. At the least, I had prepared myself to go beyond the distance it took to get here. A distance that took many decades of walking. From then, 100 years, no, 200 years had probably passed. Most likely, I had gone far beyond the place I had originally started on the river and had come a long way downstream. As always, the river's appearance didn't change. The rain that fell from the sky also had become so natural to me that I didn't even pay it any heed.
どうやらまだ私は反省していないらしい。
Even with so many years passing, there apparently hasn't been any new person coming here. The feeling that it was a good thing just barely remained. The feelings from when I first arrived, or of how wretched my sister's life had been, of how I hated the gods or whatever, still probably remain. I mean, if you think about it, I know this things what the whole ritual was for the sake of being like forgiven by the gods, and if they did exist and they didn't save your sisters, you're mad and whatever. But technically, the whole situation happened because it was orchestrated by humans in the first place. So you are actually getting angry at the wrong thing. But I guess whatever. However, there was one tiny thing that changed.
間もなく日が落ちる。少し休もう。
While whispering that, I lay on my back right there. Now, the river's water didn't wet my body. Not just that, but the rain itself didn't touch my body. Even if I placed my hand in the water when water was just about to touch my skin, I was able to repel the water.
これは戦術と呼ばれるものだろうか。
Oh. So she's starting to be able to control the water. Then why didn't then why wasn't she able to do that when the protagonist came here? She didn't seem to actually be able to do that. At some point I had become able to control water. If I touched it with my hand, I could move it freely. And even without touching it, I could repel it. And of course, I hadn't trained in order to do that. In a world that had nothing but rain and water, before I realized I was able to do it.
そういえば以前にイラツメも言っていた。
That she wasn't a god, but something like a shaman. That she could use mysterious powers beyond human understanding. She had apparently also been here for a long time, and it could be that I was coming into similar territory. If anything, in this world of rain we had lived far beyond a human's lifespan. It was limited, but backed by an entirety of time. I was also storing up knowledge from the real world.
おそらく私もすでに人にあらざるものなのだろう。
Yep. Picking up one or two powers beyond human comprehension naturally wasn't that surprising. Because there was nothing but rain and water here, I couldn't control anything but that. But if I were in the real world, I might have been called a shaman. And from there, another few years flowed by. In the continuing rain, I suddenly came to a stop as I was running on top of the water.
あった。ようやく見つけた。
So she was running Naruto style, like over the water. On the surface of the water before my eyes it appeared, a black hole that suddenly opened up. Looking at it, you could think that it was the same as the entrance that I had seen before coming here. However, back then it had been spitting out things from the real world. But this time, in contrast, it seemed to be sucking in the things that flowed in from the real world.
間違いない。これは出口だ。
Even if it were a hole that connected to the real world, there was a huge difference in the meaning it held. And I recall that when I carelessly put my hands in the entrance, everything past the wrist had disappeared. This time, gingerly getting closer, I peered in from the rim.
あ、人の姿が見える。
How many years, no, centuries has it been, to see the figures of someone other than myself? Without thinking, I lay down at the edge of the river and peered in, entranced. The scene seemed to be a village somewhere. I could see the shapes of houses and children. Before I couldn't see anything but darkness, but now I could easily see a scene. Whether I could see because this was the exit or because my powers had increased, it was probably both. Thinking about it, over 500 years have passed since I came to this world. And what I saw when I peered into the hole was children happily running around. From their appearance, they seemed to be the same age as myself. I mean, she is like 500 years old, so I don't think they can be as like your age, but okay. While I was feeling awe and excitement, I carefully stretched my hand towards the exit.
もし無事に手を入れることができれば
Then I could return to the real world. I just had to put my entire body in. Seeing the figures of people being happy for the first time in centuries, I couldn't hold back the feeling of wanting to return. And plus, by now, most barriers wouldn't be much of a bother. Already, not only could I control rain and water, I could also supernaturally control my own body. I had no idea by what powers the gods or whatever had created this place, but by now I might be able to keep my memory. While thinking about that, I slowly stretched my hand out. Keen! With a high-pitched sound, my hand was thrown back. Just at the instant where my hand was about to touch the hole, it was as if I had struck an unseen wall and could go no farther.
どうしてここは出口ではないの
Probably yes and no at the same time. I think it's only made for like an animated object. Cause as for people, they have another entrance. They don't come from the hole in the river, like upstream, so they probably cannot go back from this hole downstream. Without thinking, I tried to put my hand in over and over, and each time I was thrown back. Thinking there was nothing else to be done, I threw my entire body into the hole, but it never worked. No matter what I did, everything was thrown back. I was doing nothing more than fuss around the edge of the hole. And in contrast to myself, the other things from the real world just kept being sucked into the hole. Most were things that were fragments of something, but they all disappeared into the hole without any resistance. I didn't understand the reason. Unlike that entrance from before, it made sense that this one would have allowed me to exit. And for a few days I spent my time there. Because I couldn't understand, no matter how much I thought, I searched for a reason that would satisfy me.
入り口から来たものしか出口は通らない
Yeah, that's what I thought. This was probably the clearest reason. But I wasn't satisfied with that. If anything, I had the feeling there was a much more fundamental
もし
question.
や反省をしない者は返さないつもりだろうか
No, because I believe that the other girl, lady, how you call it, went back from your hole. I mean, she would have been sent back forcefully, but she went back from your hole, even though she said that she hadn't like felt sorry or whatever. So I don't think that's the reason. Lady had said that she had sent back over 20 people. By doing that, she probably spent a long time here. But in my case, no one has yet come. Thinking about it in reverse, it's plausible that the next person will not come to people who refuse to repent. And even now, I still hold the regrets of my sister within me. No matter how much time flows by, no matter if my own body becomes inhuman, this was a thing that I couldn't bring myself to forgive. From there, 100 years passed without me doing anything, just sitting at the edge of the exit hall in a daze. Days of simply gazing at the real world from there. Previously, the scenes just vaguely materialized, but now I was able to see places that I wanted to see.
あの人恐ろしいことを考えている。
Lately, I've been able to know a person's emotion just from looking at them, and could even clearly read what they were thinking. Have I finally reached the same point as Lady? But I think she had lived here for a much longer time, and I had a feeling she was still far out of my
今
reach.
頃彼女はどうしているだろうか。
When leaving, she had said something about coming here again, but already some 600 years have passed since then. Did memory really disappear upon leaving this place? Plus, considering the normal lifespan of people, she would have died long ago.
現世に帰りたい。だけど反省する気はない。
The contradictory words fell from my lips. The bustling scenes from the real world that the exit hall showed created the feelings within me stronger than ever. There is nothing, hunger, sickness, even death, all alone. In this world, where I've been given an eternity of time, the day that I would succumb seemed to be coming eventually, and that scared me. The next morning,
職を全うしよう。
Oh. Are you really sure about that? She really does want to go back, so... But I don't know if that is gonna help her anyway, so... I mean, it doesn't, cause we know that in the future she is still here. Thinking all night, I made up my mind. I don't think there was any really deep meaning behind it. I looked up at that completely white sky and made a declaration.
よく聞きなさい。これから職を再開する。
I mean, Lady said at first that the atonement wasn't broken in the first place, because in this, what happens in this place have no consequences, or it's not in any way connected to the real world. So I think that even if she did complete the atonement, there was, I mean, it didn't actually hold any meaning if she did it here. I raised up my voice to compete with the sound of the rain. My words directed at him, who was probably
た
there.
だしこれはあなたのためじゃない。途中でついえたお姉ちゃんのためよ。これで満足しなかったとしても、決して私は反省もしないし、あなたも許さない。
And with that one continuous declaration, I crushed my own throat. Now I can't speak. It would be back the way it was by tomorrow, but it was a way to show my will. If anything, something like this, I could heal by myself in an instant. From that day, I focused on not speaking. To begin, being alone made it so I had no chance to use my voice. On top of that, I deliberately every morning crushed my throat. To be exact with the time, I made sure that the days were countable. I knew how to read the stars, but because there were no stars here, I wrote each day down. There was nothing else to do. Wait, where did you write it? How did you write it? The only thing left was to glean knowledge and observe the world's movement while looking at the real world. The most painful were the sights of the bustling villages and the times I could see the figures of happy children that were innocently running around. If only by looks they were about the same age as myself. When I saw the figures of those children, for some reason, tears would overflow. Even though I had no intention of crying, the tears fell in large drops. For some reason, those drops would seem to be sucked into the hole just like that and disappear.
そうか。涙は現世に戻れるのだ。
Yeah, because they're technically inanimated objects. They're pretty much water with stuff. But
この身も血も通さないくせに何の皮肉だろうか。
okay. So that was it for this episode too. Because there's only one in this and not the two, parallel things, it's probably because the game is about to end. I'm really close to it. I think I'm gonna end it in this one recording session. I mean, I'm gonna play now until I finish it. So, anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching. I've been your host, Suicide, and I'll see ya in the next one. Bye bye.